I didn't cry the day I found out about Claire. I didn't scream, throw things, or fall apart on the kitchen floor like some betrayed wife in a movie. I just stared at the text message, the photo attached, and the timestamp that made everything undeniable. Then I walked upstairs, brushed my daughter's hair, and got her ready for her piano lesson like it was any other Thursday. Claire was 29, no kids, no history, just blonde, eager, and disposable. She worked at the same law firm as my husband, Mark, paralegal. New hire. He had mentioned her once over dinner, said she reminded him of someone he went to college with. I hadn't asked for more. I trusted him. Like a fool. The photo was of them at a rooftop bar. His hand was on her thigh. Her lipstick matched the one smeared on his collar the night he came home late from drinks with a client. The text said, "Last night was perfect. I wish you didn't have to leave so early." Sent at 2:14 a.m. on a Tuesday, while I was home nursing our daughter through a fever. I didn't ask him about it right away. That's not how I move. I believe in watching, waiting, learning every step before I act. I copied the photo, saved the text, and printed both. Then I made dinner, baked salmon, garlic rice, and roasted carrots, his favorite. I watched him eat, watched how easily he swallowed lies with every bite. I smiled when he complimented the meal. And I tucked our daughter in with steady hands that night. We'd been married 11 years. Our daughter, Sophie, was 9. I'd put my teaching career on hold to raise her while Mark climbed the ladder at his firm. I made the house a home. I planned every birthday, every school event, every parent-teacher conference. I knew every allergy, every bedtime story, every cue for when Sophie needed quiet. I was the glue, but I had forgotten that glue gets ignored until something breaks. The next morning, Mark left for work like always, kissed my cheek, grabbed his thermos, said he'd be home by 6. I watched him pull out of the driveway, then drove straight to the firm. I didn't go inside. I parked across the street and watched through tinted glass. Claire came out at lunch. She wore a tight gray skirt and laughed too hard at something another associate said. She looked young. She looked temporary, and that's when I knew she wasn't the real problem. He was, but still, I wanted to see how far it had gone. That weekend, I pretended to visit my sister in Chicago. Mark encouraged it. "You deserve a break," he said. "Get some rest." He had no idea I was still in town. No idea I had paid a college student $200 to install a camera in his car. No idea I'd tracked his phone's location through the family cloud account we never deactivated. No idea I sat outside the Fairmont Hotel in a rental car watching him check in with Claire at 4:13 p.m. on Saturday, room 644. I didn't confront him when he got home Sunday night. I acted like I had just gotten back, told him the train was delayed. He apologized for not calling more, said he'd missed me, kissed my forehead. I could still smell her on him, vanilla and something cheap. That was the last night I slept next to him. On Monday morning, I called a lawyer, not to file for divorce. Not yet. I needed leverage first. I needed time to plan. I started gathering bank statements, asset records, passwords he thought I didn't know. I logged his calls, tracked his texts, watched how often Claire's name popped up as Colin in his contacts. Cute. Meanwhile, I played the role. Loving wife, PTA volunteer, soft-voiced mother with fresh cookies and a color-coded calendar. I smiled at neighbors, sent thank you notes, showed up on time for everything. No one suspected a thing. What Mark didn't know, what he never even thought to consider, was that my silence wasn't weakness. It was preparation, because this wasn't just about him cheating. This was about how he humiliated me in my own home, how he brought Claire over one afternoon when he thought I was out, how Sophie saw them from the stairs, how she asked me later that week, "Mom, who was the lady in the red dress in Daddy's office?" That's when I stopped pretending this was just about a man and his mystery. That's when I started plotting the kind of revenge a man like Mark would never see coming. Not rage, not scandal, something colder, something permanent. Something that would leave him standing in the wreckage of the life he thought he controlled, while I walked away with everything he valued, especially Sophie, and especially the truth. The first step was gaining control of the finances without him noticing. I opened a separate account in my maiden name, transferred small amounts weekly from our joint savings, just enough to stay below the radar. I sold a few valuables from my mother's old estate, things Mark never cared about anyway, and deposited the cash. By the end of the month, I had enough to start executing the plan. Sophie was still going to school, still playing cello, still asking why her dad worked late so much. I didn't lie to her. I just didn't answer right away. Children can smell dishonesty, but they don't always know what to call it. So I waited. I would give her answers when I gave him consequences. I hired a private investigator, not to track Mark, but to learn everything about Claire, where she lived, her family, debts, history, habits. I didn't want dirt. I wanted precision. Turns out Claire wasn't just some naive intern swept up by an older man. She had done this before, twice, 2 different firms, one married partner fired, another divorced and broke. This was a pattern. She wasn't in love, she was strategic, and that made her useful, because I knew something she didn't. She wasn't Mark's endgame. He told her they'd move in together, that he was leaving me, that he was only staying for Sophie's sake. I read the messages. I watched the video. I even listened to one of their phone calls, recorded through the Bluetooth system in his car. She thought they were building a life, but I knew Mark better than that. He didn't want a new life. He wanted to escape accountability. So I gave him exactly that. At first, I became sweeter, more attentive. I told him I was working on myself, started jogging in the mornings, changed my hair, complimented his shirts. I even suggested a weekend trip, just the 2 of us, to reconnect, I said. He smiled like he'd won, like I had finally remembered my place. We drove to a lake cabin 2 hours north. I packed wine, board games, and a journal I hadn't touched in years. He packed condoms. Typical. On the second night, after a few glasses of Merlot, he told me he was thinking about changing jobs. Maybe in New York, he said. Bigger cases, more exposure. I asked if he'd take us with him. He paused, blinked, then smiled. Of course, babe. What kind of question is that? That was all I needed to hear, because the offer in New York didn't exist. I'd already called his managing partner. I knew about the internal complaints, the missing hours, the expenses logged under fake clients. Mark was under review. Claire didn't know. Neither did he. But I did, and I wasn't going to save him. When we got back home, I played it cool. I let him feel like things were getting better. I let him lie with ease. I even bought lingerie. That part was hard, but necessary. He needed to think I was folding. Meanwhile, I was preparing Sophie. I started taking her to therapy, quietly, just someone to talk to. Her therapist was discreet, but effective. She helped Sophie name things, helped her understand what trust meant, what boundaries were, what love should feel like. And she helped me build a custody case that would tear Mark apart. I documented everything. His absences, his lies, his inconsistent parenting. I collected screenshots, statements, video and voice logs. I spoke to Sophie's teachers, coaches, even our pediatrician. I made sure they all saw the pattern. I didn't ask them to lie. I didn't have to. The truth was loud enough. Then I waited for the firm to make its move. And they did, quietly, like all white-collar institutions do when they're protecting their own. Mark was asked to resign in exchange for discretion. No lawsuit, no press, just a silent exit. He came home that night drunk, said it was politics, said they were intimidated by his presence. I nodded, offered him a drink, watched him spiral in slow motion. By now he had no job, no real savings, no leverage. He was relying on me more each day. I told him I wanted to refinance the house, for long-term stability. He agreed. I changed the deed, shifted it into a trust, put the utilities under my name, reworked the will, even updated our emergency contacts. Everything legal, everything traceable. And then, only then, I filed for divorce. He came home to the papers on a Thursday. I was sitting at the kitchen table with Sophie doing math homework. He walked in, saw the manila envelope and froze. "What is this?" he asked. I looked up. "It's what you've been earning for the last 8 months. He opened it, flipped through the first few pages. His face went pale. "You're taking everything," he said. I didn't blink. "No, I'm taking back what you never appreciated." He looked at Sophie. She didn't say anything. She was coloring a graph. Then he turned back to me. "You can't do this." I stood up. calmly. I already did. He stormed out. Not to Claire. She'd already blocked. He didn't know I had sent her a package the week before. A copy of his messages, the receipts, the resignation letter, the firm's memo. A warning, quiet and polite, that if she ever came near Sophie again, I would make sure her name was in every deposition from every case Mark had touched. She didn't respond. She didn't have to. Her silence was confirmation, and that was the beginning of his unraveling. But I wasn't done. Not yet. The court date was set for mid-April. Mark didn't contest custody, not openly, but his lawyer tried to chip away at my image, claimed I was manipulating our daughter, that I coached her, that I'd weaponized therapy. They didn't know I'd already submitted the records, the therapist's statement, the school reports, the timeline of Mark's absences, the travel logs, the financial data. The judge barely blinked before granting me full legal custody. Mark got supervised visitation every other weekend, pending a review in 6 months. He barely looked at me in court, just stared at his own hands like they might explain how he got there. I didn't look back. After the hearing, I took Sophie to the diner near our house. She ordered pancakes for dinner and asked if she could get whipped cream. "Today's a yes day," I said. She smiled. "A real one. No questions. No worries. Just peace. The thing about revenge is, it's never about getting even. It's about ending the imbalance." And Mark had lived too long on the side of advantage, but there was still one piece left. The house. I had transferred it into a revocable trust 6 weeks before the filing. My name was the sole trustee. He hadn't read the fine print. He thought it was for tax purposes. I didn't correct him. Now he had no legal claim. Still, he tried to fight it, filed a motion to delay the sale, claimed he had equity, said he put years into the property. My lawyer handed over the home repair receipts, all in my name, paid from my account. Mark hadn't contributed financially since the year Sophie started school. The judge denied the motion. I listed the house the next week. It sold in 4 days. Above asking, I packed every room methodically. Sophie helped choose what to keep, what to leave. When we got to Mark's office, I let her decide. She stared at the books, the framed degrees, the drawer full of cufflinks. Then she said, "Leave it. None of it matters." She was right. We moved into a smaller home on the east side, cozy, quiet. I painted Sophie's room the color she wanted, not what Mark would have approved. I bought her the comforter with stars and moons, the glow-in-the-dark ceiling stickers. I let her pick the curtains. At night she didn't ask about him. She didn't wait at the window. She just slept. The first week in the new house, I got a voicemail. It was Mark. His voice was rough, slow. He said he was sorry, said he missed us, said he didn't know who he was without us. I didn't call back. A week later, another message, this one angry, accusing me of turning his daughter against him, of destroying his life, of burning it all down. I saved that one. Then I blocked his number. It wasn't about fear. It was about clarity. Some men only feel remorse when they lose control, not when they cause pain, not when they betray, only when they're removed from the center of the story. I wasn't his supporting character anymore, and he couldn't stand it. But that's not where the story ends. It ends with a letter from Claire, handwritten, folded in thirds, no return address. It came 3 months after the divorce was finalized. I opened it slowly. Her handwriting was small and neat. She didn't apologize, not directly. She just said, "I didn't realize how much of a liar he was until I saw what he did to you and your daughter. I thought I was different. I wasn't." She ended it with, "You were right to burn it down." I read it twice, then I shredded it, because her words didn't matter, not anymore. She was just one piece of the fire. I was the match, and Sophie, she was the reason I lit it. Summer came fast that year. Sophie spent most afternoons riding her bike down the new cul-de-sac, barefoot and free. I'd sit on the porch with iced tea, watching her from behind a book, the kind I hadn't read in years. Stories without betrayal, without caution, just pages that didn't ask me to brace for impact. One afternoon, she came home with a scraped knee and a story about a frog she found near the drainage ditch. I patched her up, kissed her head, and listened as she described every detail like it was a fairy tale. She didn't mention her father once, not even in passing. And that's when I knew we were healing. Not perfectly, not quickly, but truthfully. The messages from Mark stopped after the court sent him a formal warning. I knew where he was, barely holding on to a downtown apartment, taking contract work. The firm didn't blacklist him, but they didn't help either. Reputation mattered in his world, and his had thinned like cheap fabric. He filed an appeal for joint custody that fall. The judge denied it in less than 10 minutes. I hadn't poisoned Sophie against him. He had done that himself. Every lie, every missed pickup, every time he promised to call and didn't. Kids remember, and when they're old enough, they name it. By Thanksgiving, we were settled. I hosted my sister and her 2 kids. We made stuffing from scratch. Sophie set the table herself. She added little name cards in her careful cursive. Hers read, Sophie Brave. I didn't correct her. That night, after everyone left, she asked me a question I hadn't prepared for. Do you think Daddy loved us at all? I didn't lie. I think he loved himself more. She nodded, didn't cry, just said, that's what I thought. Then she went to bed. Some people think revenge is cruel, that it makes you bitter, hollow, but I think they confuse revenge with justice. Because what I did wasn't about punishing Mark, it was about removing him from the pedestal I had placed him on for too long. It was about protecting Sophie from growing up thinking that love looks like inconsistent, that apologies fix everything, that men can betray and still be considered fathers by title alone. Mark had called it betrayal when I filed for divorce, when I took the house, when I took custody. He never called what he did betrayal. Just mistakes, just complicated timing. But I was done softening the language. He didn't lose his family. He abandoned us, then I made sure the door stayed closed. People in town started asking questions. They always do. At first, I stayed quiet, let them guess, but eventually I told the truth. The version with no dressing. He had an affair, he got sloppy, he got caught. And I refused to let my daughter grow up thinking that was acceptable. Most of them nodded, some of them looked uncomfortable, especially the men. But I wasn't speaking for their comfort. I was speaking for Sophie. She deserved to see what strength looked like, what boundaries looked like, what survival without shame looked like, and what it meant to walk away without begging to be understood. Mark never came to the school plays after that. He didn't show up for Sophie's birthday, didn't send a card, didn't call. She stopped asking, and I stopped expecting. We didn't erase him from memory, but we stopped giving him access, because he hadn't earned it. And love, real love, doesn't beg for scraps. It demands presence. It builds safety. It takes responsibility when it breaks something. And it never confuses silence for forgiveness. Not in this house. Not anymore. It was a Wednesday when the envelope arrived. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in block letters across the front. I knew it was from him. Not because of the writing, because of the timing. The court had just sent the final notice. Visitation rights terminated. He hadn't shown up for the last 4 appointments. Not once. Sophie had waited in her Sunday dress the first 2 times. By the third, she didn't even ask. The letter inside was short. 5 lines. I miss her. I know I failed. Tell her I'm sorry. I hope she'll forgive me someday. And then please don't hate me. I read it twice. Then I placed it in the drawer with the other papers. The custody order. The therapist's letters. The photographs I had taken that winter when Sophie stopped smiling in the mornings. Not out of anger, just for the record, just in case she ever asked, because someday she might want to know what happened, why he left, why I didn't stop him, why we never went back. And I'll tell her about the time I tried, about the days I stayed for her thinking that was the noble choice. I'll tell her how I watched her spirit shrink every time he broke a promise. How she learned to be small in rooms he filled, how silence became her language, and how I knew that saving her would mean letting him go without rescue. One morning in early spring, Sophie and I were walking to school. She reached for my hand and asked, "Are we always going to be just us?" I paused, then said, "Just us is enough." She smiled. "Yeah, I like it this way. There's a photo on our fridge now. It's not fancy, not framed. Just a printout from the school assembly last month. Sophie standing on stage, arms wide open, grinning so big her eyes disappear. She had just read a poem she wrote about bravery. Her teacher said it made the janitor cry. The last line of the poem was, "Being brave isn't loud. It's just not leaving yourself behind." I taped it next to the grocery list, because I want to see it every morning, to remind myself what came out of the fire. Not ash, not ruin, but a girl who knows her worth. A girl who carries her name like armor. A girl who saw what love wasn't, and chose better. And me. I didn't just survive betrayal. I turned it into boundaries, into peace, into a life that didn't need permission. I no longer replay the betrayal. I no longer need to prove anything to him. My revenge wasn't the house, or the custody, or the silence. It was waking up beside the daughter I protected, every single day, in a house that holds no lies, only truth, only light, only us.